Athennian is very excited to announce the private markets edition of the tool. This edition is going to introduce new grouping structures of entities in the application, allowing you to combine entities into a fund structure or a deal. Now, it is very common in the private markets space and in the equity space for entities that are managed by the legal team in the legal form to also be referenced and used with a purpose in the fund team's investment structures. This is critical to the management of data, to the operation of capital, to the growing of revenue. And what commonly happens in the industry is that these two departments operate on completely separate tools or technologies, making it difficult to keep data up to date. With this enhancement, what we are going to allow teams to do is bring those fund structures and those mappings and formats into the Athennian format and tool to give both departments access to the same data, but to reference them in the formats and groupings that typically make the most sense for those departments. In this case here, again, when I open my entities table, again, these are my legal entities. They are legally registered in certain jurisdictions. They have, as we know, governance sections. They have different appointments like directors and officers, and they have their minute books. So they've got all those documents structured within folders within each entity. Now, in addition to that, equity teams often need to lean on these specific entities, but they don't commonly look at the legal form of these entities. They also look at those entity types pertaining to what they operate as in a fund structure or a fund, as the market likes to call it. We call it structures because it's a grouping, so keep in mind this is a fund structure format here. These are all funds, but we're going to be referencing them as fund structures. Once I open a fund structure that I have created, you're going to notice multiple things. In here, once I've created a fund structure, I can set the industry it operates in, the jurisdiction, I can set tags, and I can set access groups, keeping permissions and security at the forefront of my operations. Once I have that set up, I can then assign existing legal entities to this fund structure. So again, this is where the data mapping makes so much more sense and maintains a lot of accuracy and upkeep. Persephone 3M Company is an entity that my legal team manages. It is an LLC entity. It is registered perhaps in Luxembourg and has certain compliance dates. That entity, though, is a vehicle in a fund structure that my equity team needs to use as it starts to grow revenue, as they make capital and investments off of these entities. They need to utilize that entity in and of itself as a shell or as a vehicle and as a role to play within this structure. Here I've got, again, Persephone 3M Company LLC, but you'll notice it operates as a fund in this fund structure. Now we have different types and purposes that entities can hold in the structure. When you add in a new entity here, you will be met with a couple of prompts. I'm going to add in a new one here. So Airborne SARL is an Indian registered entity. And I'm going to set what tier and purpose it serves within this higher level fund. So in this case, I'm going to leave it as the tier fund, but I'm going to make it specific that this is a private fund, or it is an SPV or a co-investment vehicle as part of Adama Investments. It has a specific purpose and has a specific need that it solves for within the management of this structure. Clicking on the co-investment vehicle, adding in an effective date, I've now introduced that one entity to the Adama investment structure. And that would mean that up the bottom here, I can see that Airborne SARL Fund Co-Investment Vehicle entity as part of this broader group. You can map out the entities again within different tiers and categories, and you are always able to track all changes with the audit trail. So here you'll notice I have introduced that entity, and I've got the record that it is connected to, as well as the connection type that is linked to it. So this is a specific fund structure vehicle. And at the same breath, if my legal team was to open this entity itself, again in its legal form, and head into the relationship section, fund structures and deal, it will see, or they will see, which fund structure or fund this entity belongs to. So here you'll see again that backwards view of that mapping, that it is a part of Adama Investments at the capacity of fund. Likewise, when we are creating deals, these are very typical in the industry. They lead into capital that often funds and finances the different operations of the funds and LPs and GPs within a fund structure. You can have a deal at the early stage that is mainly an opportunity and not a deal yet, and we allow for both scenarios. So here I have the ability to set in the deal name if I know the deal of the assets and the entities that roll up into the portcos and holdings, or I can set and establish an opportunity name like Opportunity Fort Worth or Opportunity 17, and set the industry and status of that opportunity as it starts rolling into my company. So what happens a lot of the time is an opportunity will surface. It hasn't become a deal yet, and this will eventually roll into a fund. We want to make sure we keep track of that. So here we can create that opportunity. There is, again, no deal name just yet, and you can go in and add your entities as well. Now, once a deal is established and I have a bit of a framework, I can move the opportunity into a deal, set the deal name, and then I can add all of the entities that are connected to this deal. Here, Constellation Management is a part of this deal. Now, it's important to note that an entity can be a part of a fund or a deal or both. And again, once you click on that entity and head to Fund Structures, you will be met with all of the data from the other direction or from the other view, giving you clarity into the name, the deal name, the opportunity name, and the type. Now we are able to edit these columns. If there is something that is not relevant to you and you do not want to see a certain thing, you can remove it. So here, if this case, I want to remove all of the dates and I want to remove deal and opportunity, and I only care about fund structure and deal, let's say, I can apply that and navigate these columns, making different adjustments and edits so that they make sense for me and my team. This is at the user level, so keep that in mind. It will be relevant only to you. The same can happen at the highest level fund structures. I can come in here and adjust a couple of things. I can also open a fund structure and at the same time look at these columns and reference more details as needed. Again, all edits will be made to the audit trail. I can filter and I can save filters as well as search. And then the last and final piece that we want to show your teams is the ability to generate a visual chart of all of the entities connected to this fund. Now I'm simply going to click on that button and the system is going to map out the groupings of the entities based on the purposes and tiers of the fund structure that they are in. So all of my limited partner entities will show up at the top left. All of my general partner entities will show up at the top right, and all of my fund entities will show in the middle. This is very common in the private markets industry to surface and map the entities in this format. So I can maneuver them around and navigate them as needed as I am drawing this chart out in the application. So again, keep in mind a very, very powerful tool in terms of how you are able to map and size things out within an entity. Once I have established my groupings in my chart, I can go ahead and be even more specific. I can remove certain sections that I don't need to see. In this case here, I've removed deal entities, portcos. I can also remove fund entities if I needed to, resurface them again. And I am able to color or categorize the overall layout of these groupings. So if I did not want my feeders, my feeder funds, my parallel funds, my blocker funds to live within a box like this, I can remove those borders, and you must do this while you're editing them to make sure that you keep the structure and maintain all the changes. But there you'll notice I have removed that border from this specific group and category, and I have made it transparent. Now I can add a fill in here if I needed to, or I can leave that blank, which is again the preference of the teams, and hit save to make that preference my default. Once that's done, I again am able to navigate and move these entities in the space and placement of my preference so that the groupings are clear and follow the formats that my team prefer. Once I am done with that, again, I have this beautifully laid out fund chart that clearly depicts the different areas the entities operate in. I'm also able to, again, change the colors of different shapes. So if I wanted to fill out all of my partner shapes with a specific color, again, having to do this ahead of all your final changes to make sure everything maps and saves. But I am able to adjust those colorings, and then that would show up here in my chart as the final formats. This is an incredibly powerful tool. It allows us to expand beyond just the regular ownership connections a legal entity can have, and gives us the flexibility of accommodating more departments, more operational needs, and different team needs that utilize the same data but in different contexts and with different referencing points. It is important for the same data to always remain accurate, and so anchoring it in one system makes the most sense for these complex teams. However, having it in one source, we also need to make sure that the way it's represented speaks the language of the team reading it. And this is how we fulfill that goal and that outcome by addressing them with these high-level structures and allowing them to categorize them with what makes the most sense. Enjoy this update. Let us know, as always, if you have any feedback, and we will continue to improve this product as we continue again to improve the rest of Athennian. Enjoy what you see today, and we hope it brings a lot of value to the teams that use our application.